Well, Canada is going to reap what Donald Trump sowed in damaging the relationships with South Korea. Let's just say that Prime Minister Carney is going to pick the pocket of Donald Trump in the wake of the 300 South Korean workers who were subject to an ICE raid a couple of weeks ago in Georgia, when all they were doing under proper visas was trying to build a battery factory for Hyundai as it looked to expand in Georgia. Trump's loss, the American people's loss, the American economy's loss is Canada's gain as they continue to strengthen their ties and relationships with South Korea. Canada, what used to be a major trading partner with the United States, of course, that was crushed and dashed by Donald Trump and his insane economic policies attacking his major trading partners in the Northern Hemisphere. When you look to Canada, when you think Canada and you think exports, what do you think? You think fuels, you think vehicles, you think mechanics and nuclear power plants being built, you think plastics and wood and aluminum and other technologies. So they need to have a legitimate trading partner. South Korea, who is already right now rejecting American calls for a $350 billion investment in the United States by South Korea. President Lee telling Donald Trump, this is all after the Georgia raid where they took away South Korean workers in chains. Never a good look for a former colonial power, especially if you're talking about people who are Asian. President Lee telling trade negotiators, we can't invest $350 billion in the U.S. even if we wanted to, because that would tank the South Korean economy, sending its tail spinning like 1997 to pull that much currency out of the South Korean economy, which is delicate to begin with. So President Lee turns to the other major trading partner in North America, Canada, and Canada says, thank you again to Donald Trump. I'm Michael Popok. You're here on the MeidasTouch Network. Welcome to the Midas Maple and the Midas Mighty all over, including our friends in Canada. As I've said before, Canada, you're going to have to hold the flame of freedom and democracy because we are on hiatus being run by Donald Trump. We can no longer consider ourselves to be the leaders of the free world, to be the beacon for democracy. We have to instead defer to our Canadian brothers to the north and sisters to the north, and as well as the European Union and the UK, because we are on a break from making any new democracies and supporting democratic values the way that that used to stand for the United States ideal as that shining beacon on the hill. Canada is not letting any grass grow under its feet. Once Donald Trump decided to go after the Prime Minister Carney the way he went after Trudeau to try to destabilize Canada, Canada has responded, as we've all seen. Tourism down 50%. Canadians aren't coming to America anymore. They're going to other places and investing their tourist dollar. Tourism overall in America down over 10%, a lot of that being driven by Canada, which was the number one tourist visitor was coming from Canada before. So the other thing I like about Prime Minister Carney, who, as just to remind mainly those in America, he was a central banker. He was effectively the Jay Powell in both the UK and Canada. He knows a thing or two about macro and microeconomics and monetary policy. And he immediately turned to strengthening Canada's infrastructure, its industries, to put money and invest the public money into private enterprise to retool it for the new world order that Donald Trump has created to benefit Canada. If America is going to be America first under Donald Trump, then Canada is going to have to be Canada first and a global leader to replace and to fill the vacuum with the Trump U.S. withdrawal. Now that brings us to South Korea. Now, even before Donald Trump's perverse and inhumane immigration policies ran headlong into his global economic policies, all coming to a head in Georgia at a Hyundai LE plant, building Well, they're building a factory in order to build batteries for cars. Now, South Korea had already committed to investing hundreds of billions of dollars, ultimately in the United States, until this incident. Now, they're going to continue to, they've already got they've already got the sunk costs related to that battery factory. So they're going to continue to build that and invest in that. But other money, they're going to put it in the Canadian relationship, in the Mexican relationship. Canada has been promoting its relationships with South Korea for a long time. We could use, Canada, you want to build nuclear subs with us? Let's do it. You want to have gas and oil? You want to do a pipeline? You want to have Arctic channels for shipping between Canada and South Korea? Let's do it. And now they're emboldened because America's loss is Canada's gain, as it should be, as a reflection of proper leadership up in Canada and the fighting spirit there to fight back. It's not what you do when you get punched in the face, it's what you do next in response. And Canada's response has been pitch perfect. Their economy is on even keel because it's being run by an adult who can do two things at one time. Can promote and support Canadian values, values of sovereignty, values of patriotism, values of, uniting their large territory together with all of, they have a very diverse ethnographic community in Canada. They're able to do all of that while having economic policies that help Canadians and replace what was once the reliance on U.S. policy. Well, what did Donald Trump think was going to happen? It's so bad that Governor Kemp from Georgia has to now go to South Korea. I don't think this was part of his plan. And go visit the South Koreans and go visit the Hyundai plant while he's there in order to continue to promote and clean up promote Georgia and clean up the diplomatic mess created by Kristi Noem, ICE, Homeland Security, and Donald Trump. Now, President Lee in South Korea, who was welcomed into the Golden Oval Office visit with Donald Trump just a few months ago, he's trying to clean egg off his face. He's embarrassed politically, culturally, by what happened in Georgia. And of course he can't invest $350 billion into the United States and its economy. Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, says things like, they just need to do what Japan did. Well, South Korea is not Japan. South Korea has its own sovereignty, its own people, its own economic issues, its own commodities, its own gross domestic product, its own export issues, again, with the threat of tariffs. And once again, just as a primer, as people like to say, what is a tariff? Nothing more than a tax on the consumer. It's not going to be the South Koreans that pay the tax or pay the tariff. It's you, the consumer, who gets things from LG and chip manufacturing. Do you know the number one manufacturer, actual fabricator of American chips, computer chips, including those all important and valuable AI chips, is South Korea. So now we're going to tax the South Korean chip. Who does that get passed on to? JP Morgan Chase says 75% of that total, let's do it this way. Let's say there's a 30% tariff that's placed on South Korea goods and services and chips. Okay, based on analysis by JP Morgan, of that, about 21% of that 31% is going to be eaten by the American consumer. Meaning your prices are going to go up on things you buy from South Korea that you need, like electronics, like consumer goods, like chips. The chips that show up in your kid's laptop for school, for community college, for four-year school, for public school, whatever it is, just went up. And if you're in a public school environment, then your taxes are going to go up to cover the increase. It is the the single greatest tax increase on American people in our history is Donald Trump's tariff scheme, which he has used as the foundation of his entire the foreign and domestic policy is based on the tariffs. Tariffs, which may soon be struck down, we'll find out in November, by the United States Supreme Court, while Donald Trump continues to collect tariffs that he might have to pay back. It's that instability that has led South Korea to effectively declare, along with its business community, that the U.S. is uninvestable. We're going to put our money somewhere else. And there is Canada with open arms, saying, invest here, build your plants here. And now they're seriously considering it as a continuation of the strong relationship developed over the last 5 or 10 years, now accelerated by Prime Minister Carney, between South Korea and Canada. I'm going to continue to follow the fallout of the chaining together and deporting South Korean workers. And let me make one last comment before we end this hot take. Donald Trump and I did a separate hot take on this on Legal AF. Donald Trump just came up with a crazy idea to increase the filing fee for H-1B high-tech foreign worker visas. These are people that are PhDs and engineers and doctorates and have just high-tech skills in STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math that we don't have in the United States. And in order to expand to match the pace and velocity of the economy, businesses, whether they're owned by the South Koreans or foreign companies or domestic companies, need these people in order to expand. They don't get these people, they can't expand. They don't get the engine, they can't drive the car. If they don't build the car, then all the other economic disasters happen. Americans aren't employed for the other jobs. The economy is depressed. So Donald Trump is stopping foreigners. This is really also targeted at the Indian population. India had done a great job at bringing in a lot of high-tech, high-educated, English-speaking people into the United States at high demand. That is now going to be killed by a $100,000 fee up from $5,000. Who's going to bring in a high-tech worker at a $100,000 fee? You know how much you have to make on that person to justify that? You know, or we're going to bring in, we need 10 workers. It's $1 million. You got to figure you're going to make, 20 times that to get your money back. So that's going on. And then when a company like Hyundai brings in its own high-tech workers under its own visa program, U.S. visa program, they're thrown out of the country. We've become unhospitable to people of education and training. And all I get is Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, saying, just hire a new American graduate and teach them how to build a battery factory. I guess that's how he ran his Wall Street company. He just hired new graduates, new MBAs, and put them on the trading desk. That's not how it works on building a battery factory or being an electrician to build an AI data center or to be a chip manufacturer. It doesn't happen overnight. If you're going to retool, this is going to be the industrial revolution. That didn't happen between the midterms. That was decades and decades before, we saw the revolution. I'll continue to follow it all right here on the MeidasTouch Network and Legal AF. Until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.